Hello and welcome to the CBT Nuggets CCNA Voice series. My name is Jeremy Chara, and I am really excited to get into this CCNA Voice series with you. Now, if you've had me for some of the other CBT Nuggets series, you know that I'm really excited about everything and anything to do with Cisco. I just get excited about it just because Cisco's cool stuff. But I'm really excited about this series, and I'll tell you why. I just got back 2 weeks ago from the Cisco Networkers 2008 conference. Actually, they don't even call it Cisco Networkers anymore. They call it Cisco Live. That's their new term. Cisco Live 2008 conference, where they announced all these new CCNA Voice, CCNA Security, and CCNA Wireless certifications. But the problem is, I've known about these certifications for about 2 months prior to this because I've been working on a Cisco Press CCNA Voice book, and I've been writing a book about CCNA Voice. But of course, when you know about stuff before it's announced, you have to sign all these non-disclosures and, essentially sign over rights to your family, like they will become slaves if you tell anyone. So you can't tell anyone. So now I can tell everybody, and CCNA Voice is so much cooler than I had originally imagined. It fills a niche that has long since been missing in the voice program for Cisco. So that's what I want to talk about in this opening nugget. I want to talk about the purpose and requirements for the CCNA Voice. Like, where does this fit in the certification world? Is it valuable? What does this fill a requirement for future certifications? And what can you do with this? I then want to talk about getting the most from this series, whether you're planning on getting certified or whether you're just wanting to get into the Cisco Voice world and deploy Cisco Voice networks. How can you get the best return on investment from this entire series? Well, let's dive right into the nitty-gritty details about the CCNA Voice purpose and requirements. The CCNA Voice came out in June 2008, which is about 2 weeks ago from when I'm talking to you right now. It addresses what I would consider the gap between the CCNA and CCVP, the Voice Professional certifications. Now, if you're just getting into the Cisco realm, let me expound a little bit on this. The CCNA is kind of the foundation welcome to the world of Cisco certifications for anybody that wants to get into the world of Cisco education and Cisco certification. To get a CCNA, you typically go a 2-exam path, taking ICND 1, which is also known as the CCENT, the entry-level network technician certification. You pass that one exam, you've got your CCENT. You pass one more, and you get your CCNA. Now, once people have a CCNA, if they're interested in voice over IP, the next test or next step they would do would be to get into the CCVP track, normally with a series and exam called C-Voice, Cisco Voice over IP. Now, and by the way, C-Voice does not actually stand for Cisco Voice over IP. It used to actually stand for Cisco Voice over Frame Relay, ATM, and IP, but now they've changed it, but now I'm just talking on. So anyhow, C-Voice essentially started with like, okay, here is the world of PBX systems and how those work and all that, and it would totally blow the mind of people that were getting into the CCVP certification. For network people, they would come into the C-Voice world and go, wow, this is really uninteresting stuff, frankly, because they're getting into PBX systems and, this is how time division multiplexing works and all this kind of stuff that they're just like, wow, I had no idea you really had to get this deep into like telephony fundamental kind of material. Now, for the other class of people that were going to the CCVP, they were the PBX people. They were people coming from the telephony world and upgrading their skills into the voice certification realm. Now, they were going through CCNA, learning about things like VLANs, subnetting, WAN links, frame relay, all this kind of stuff, and they're just going, now, how does this apply? How does this apply to voice and voice over IP? And the answer is it doesn't really. I mean, it's stuff that you have to know to get into Cisco, but it doesn't relate directly to voice. So they were just kind of learning stuff for the sake of learning stuff without really any purpose. Then when they got into C-Voice, you see I'm expounding on this second bullet here quite a bit. There was a big gap. They would get into C-Voice and they'd be like, oh, okay, we're in the voice world now, but we're talking about all the stuff we already know. We know how PBXs work. We know how time division multiplexing, because that's what we've been doing for years. So let me bring this home. The CCNA Voice fills the gap. What CCNA Voice does is bridge the gap for the network and voice people. For the network people, it gives them, and as you're going to see in this series, it'll give you enough of the telephony fundamentals to go, okay, I know what people are talking about. I know how to interface with the public switch telephone network. I know what kind of connections a PBX handles and how they communicate and that kind of thing. So it'll fill those gaps, but then dive enough into the voice over IP technology that you'll be able to set up a small business / medium business solution using Call Manager Express. For the voice people, they're coming in, getting a quick review on their voice material, then getting into the voice over IP world directly. And then when they continue on into the CCVP track, there's a huge foundation that has already been laid for both sets of people that they can just continue right on and go, oh, okay, this is old hat. We've seen this, done that. This all makes sense. It all fits together. So, as of June 2009, I'm sure you've already read that, CCNA Voice becomes an official prerequisite for CCVP. Right now, it's July of 2008. What Cisco decided was that will give people that have started the CCVP certification enough time to finish before they now have to take an additional exam, CCNA Voice. So the aim of CCNA Voice, the goal when you have this certification, is that you will be able to design, implement, and manage a voice network of around 200 users. And I say around because that's about the maximum number of users, around 240 or so, maximum users can be handled by the Call Manager Express, or I'm sorry, I can't stop calling it Call Manager. It's been called Call Manager for years and years, and now they've called it the Cisco Unified Communication Manager Express, which is much harder to say, system. So that supports up to around 200 or so users. So that's the goal by the time you have the information needed for CCNA Voice. Man, can you tell I have a lot to say about this CCNA Voice certification? A lot of thoughts running through my mind. So let me talk about the Cisco certification track in general and talk about where this fits into the picture. Cisco certification is, and always has been, in extremely high demand, especially now that Cisco is in the voice over IP realm and is one of the #1 players in the voice over IP market. People are upgrading their networks to voice over IP and video over IP, and the lack of expertise out there on it is huge because it's a totally new technology. So as it applies to Cisco certification, in 2007, the CCNA program went through a major revision. That's when they introduced the CCENT, that kind of base entry level. You see it on the pyramid right over here. The base entry-level certification for Cisco came out. CCNA was completely revised, and honestly, it became more difficult. The point of entry, if you will, into the Cisco world became more difficult, as all things do as technology evolves, get more complex and more difficult. So now it essentially doubled the length and strength of the CCNA certification. The test was revised to become extremely real world. And what I mean by that is Cisco just got tired of this term called a paper CCNA or paper CCNP. You actually usually hear that term as it applies to Microsoft certifications, like a paper MCSE, because that would be somebody who can pass an exam but doesn't really know how to do what the exam says they should be able to do in the real world. Well, Cisco said, we don't want that. If you're going to pass this test, you have to really know how to do it. So they revised the exam to introduce a ton of simulation questions where you're actually required to configure different things. Even the multiple choice questions on the exam aren't the normal, did you memorize the material sort of multiple choice. The multiple choice is, can you apply the material? For example, as I go through here, we're going to talk about a lot of facts through this series. I'll talk about, for instance, the fact of what speed or what delay maximum can voice have to get from the starting phone to the ending phone. Meaning, when you talk into a phone, your voice has to reach its destination in a certain amount of time. If it doesn't, you have quality of service issues like delayed echoing voice and dropped packets and things like that. Now, the fact of that is that it's 150 milliseconds. You have to get it to get good high quality voice from point A to point Z in 150 milliseconds or less. Now, chances are you'll never see that question on the exam, ever. because it's a factoid. It's something that anyone can memorize from some website or practice exam or something like that. You'll see the questions worded more into like a story problem scenario, just saying, Bob was making a call, his delay was this, there's so many other factors that came into the picture, and then, based on this information, what do you think is the problem? Or how could we best fix this? Very, very scenario-based multiple choice, very real world. So, as I mentioned just a moment ago, in 2008, Cisco introduced the additional CCNA certifications. I just took the CCNA Voice exam yesterday. I think I was one of the first people to actually take it. But it is it follows in suit with the CCNA logic of this is a very real-world exam. If you don't know your stuff, you're not going to pass. So here is the new Cisco certification track. It may not be so new by the time you're hearing this, but it's new as of right now. Previously, the Cisco certification track looked like a bunch of an upside-down tree, I should say, to where you had the CCENT here, you had the CCNA, and then it just kind of went like this, to where all paths kind of branched off from this CCNA. Well, now they've introduced these new certifications, CCNA Voice, CCNA Security, and not shown here, CCNA Wireless. Now, the CCENT is kind of the ground level certification that you get that will lead you to the CCNA. Take one more exam and you can get this CCNA. Now, for the brave at heart, or the people that have been in the Cisco world for some time and just want to start getting some credentials behind their name, there's actually a single exam, the 640-4, it's 802. The 802 exam, forgive my mouse, I was writing diagonally. The 640-802 exam is the all-in-one, meaning you can actually skip the CCENT if you can pass this one test and you'll get the CCNA credential. Of course, that one exam is quite difficult compared to taking the two exam path. Now, one of the things that I was actually shocked about is that the official prerequisite for the CCNA Voice and CCNA Security and CCNA Wireless is actually the CCNA. All the information I had before this was released said that CCENT was going to be the prerequisite. That you would have CCENT, and then you could choose whether you want to go for this CCNA, that CCNA, or that CCNA. I'm still, like, when I draw that out like that, I'm going, that makes total sense. Why didn't it go that way? But it didn't. I'm sure just a last-minute change, or maybe Cisco had this planned all along. I'm not sure. But CCNA became the official prerequisite for the CCNA Voice and CCNA Security. So you do have to have a very solid routing and switching foundation with a CCNA before you can venture into the voice and security world. Now, when I say it that way, of course it sounds good and makes sense, but still, I'm still shocked that it wasn't CCENT as the very beginning. Now, as I was mentioning, June 2009, these guys kick in as official prerequisites for CCSP and CCVP. So you have to have these before you can venture into the CCVP or SP tracks. Now, in my mind, that is going to actually cause a lot more people, well, I don't know, this is a guess, but I think a lot more people are going to go for the CCNP first. Here's why. Currently, as I talk, and everything always changes, as I talk, the CCNP is 4 exams. Then you're considered a Cisco Certified Network Professional, and you pretty much have mastered the routing and switching world, at least at the professional level certifications, before you go on to the CCIE, which is 2 exams, 1 written and 1 practical lab exam where you actually travel to Cisco, and it's a full-blown day, living nightmare, kind of configure the biggest network you've ever done in a day kind of thing that you're setting up, and you become a Cisco Certified Internetwork Expert. The reason I think CCNPs are going to become like a new, I shouldn't say new, but a preferred route first is because if you think of it this way, you figure CCENT is 1 exam, CCNA is 1 exam, and then you have 4 more to get your CCNP. Now compare that to CCVP. If you go for CCVP, you've got 1 exam, CCENT, 2 exams, CCNA, 3 exams, CCNA Voice, and then the CCVP and I should say SP tracks, are also 5 additional exams. So you're looking at a total of 8 exams to get the CCVP certification, or SP, as opposed to 6 exams to get the CCNP certification. And it's a little easier to kind of master the CCNP. And the reason that's that way is because CCNA just naturally bleeds into CCNP. The way I describe CCNA is it's kind of like the mountains of technology of Cisco. You have, for instance, the voice, or I shouldn't say voice, security. You have routing. You have switching. You know, all these mountains of technology. And the CCNA just kind of goes clip, 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 clip. Talks about the tip of the iceberg on each one of these. Now, as you get into the CCNP, you're not going to really see anything radically like, whoa, that's totally new. You're mainly just going to be walking down the mountains. You learned a little bit about routing in NA, but when you come down to the BSCI exam for CCNP, that's where you really learn all about routing and what's possible there. So you just kind of fill in the rest of the mountains. Whereas when you go this way, it's almost like you start over. It's like, okay, well, let's start over again. Here's telephony fundamentals. Here's a bunch of new stuff we haven't talked about in the CCNA. So that's why you need the extra exams. That's why it's 8 exams as opposed to 6 for the CCNP. Now, I do want to mention, last thing I'll mention on this slide, each exam has an expiration of 3 years. But Cisco's recertification policy is phenomenal. Meaning, if I go for the CCENT exam. Oh, let me grab my pen here. My CCENT exam, and I pass that. It now has 3 years before it's expired, and I'm no longer a CCENT. Now, 3 years from now, I can either take the CCENT exam again, or before my CCNA exam or CCNT exam expires, take the CCNA. As soon as I pass that, it automatically renews this for 3 more years, and then I have this one, which lasts for 3 years. Now, if I decide to go over here and I pass this one, let's say, I passed this one 3 years ago, I passed this one 2 years ago. Well, immediately these both, I'm just scribbling, these both have a shelf life of 3 years. Well, maybe a year later, I then pass the CCNA Voice. Well, now this has a shelf life of 3 years, and it automatically renews these guys to where they last for 3 years. The truth is, as you go further on and pass any exams, as you move into the CCVP or NP or SP, it automatically renews all the other lower level certifications. That is awesome. Awesome, because it means you can really diversify yourself without fear of having to keep up. For example, I'm a CCVP, a CCIE in routing and switching, a CCSP, and some other, they're called specialized certifications that aren't shown here. But if I had to retake all these exams every 3 years, it would be a nightmare. So what I do is every 2 years, actually, because the CCIE has a expiration of 2 years, I retake the written exam for the CCIE, which renews my CCIE certification and all of these other lower level certifications. This one gets renewed for 2 more years, and all these get 3 more years shelf life on them. So one exam renews every Cisco certification that I have. That's pretty awesome. Well, let me wrap things up by talking about how to get the most from this series. First and foremost is repetition. Just scientifically proven, the more times you see, hear, and do something, the better you're going to remember it. I was actually really disheartened when I was doing studying on how people learn and how they remember things. And if somebody just remembers something, or hears something, I should say, audibly, they will remember about 3%. It's actually, depending on the person, 3 to 5% of what they hear audibly 3 months from now. Now, after 3 months, just about all of what they hear audibly goes away. Now, that's disappointing because I do a lot of one-day seminars and things like that. Like, I was just at the Cisco Live conference, did a little 2-hour presentation on voice fundamentals and getting people into the voice over IP world. And people were like, this is great, we love it, it's awesome. And I was thinking, but 3 months from now, I'm going to ask you, and you're going to remember 3% of what I talked about. So as you hear it more and more, the fact is, and from the studies shown, if you hear something 6 times, hear something, see something, do something 6 times, you are going to be remembering that 6 months from now. Now, I'm not saying, when you hit, the last video of this series, you can say, okay, let's start it all over again and go through it 6 more times. Don't do that. By the time you're done, you're going to be like, I never want to hear Jeremy Chara again. I'm so tired of repeating him. But just key stuff. That's what I'm saying. Key stuff. Look at it. See it. Do it again and again. Take notes as you're going through these videos. Either open a Word document next to you or Notepad, or just grab one of those yellow pads. That's what I do. I always love filling up yellow pads, and just jot down as you hear some key fact or a configuration. You might write down the configuration. That'll not only help you remember it, but it creates a great cram study sheet if you are interested in certification. This one is going to be rough. Purchasing a lab router. The reason I say it's rough is because if you're used to the CCNA level lab equipment, you're thinking, great, I can do that in like $100 or less. Well, when you get into the voice world, you're looking at all new equipment, all new modules, all expensive stuff. My ideal lab recommendation is that you grab a Cisco 2801 router. It's one of the cheapest all-in-one routers. I'm not going to say the cheapest router, but it is one of the cheapest all-in-one routers that does just about everything that we're going to be doing in this entire series. That should be equipped with a Cisco Unity Express AIM module, which is just a little flash chip version of Unity Express. It's the voicemail system. 2 FXS ports and 2 FXO ports. Now, we're going to be exploring what those ports are in just a moment. But grab that router with that equipment and a Cisco, one or more Cisco IP phones. I'd recommend at least 2 of them, because that way you can get some calls going. One phone is cool, but you can't call anybody with one phone. So, a couple Cisco IP phones. I'm guessing with your eBay savviness or connections, you could probably put this lab together for, I know, hang on, hold your breath. I'm guessing $1,000, $1,100, maybe around there, maybe like $600 if you're really eBay savvy, or you kill somebody. I don't know, but it's expensive, and there's no way around it to put together a lab. So you might also look at renting equipment, or you can also put together what I would call the extreme budget lab. And what I'm talking about there is just go for stuff that Cisco doesn't make anymore, like a Cisco MC3810 router. That is one of their first voice routers ever. It actually comes with FXS and FXO ports. If you buy it, and you probably get it for $30. But the problem with the MC3810 is that a lot of the commands, the syntax that they use on that, we don't use anymore, and it's not going to support a lot of the features that we need. So you may get it to tinker around with, but again, for a full study material, that's what I would recommend as a lab equipment. I feel bad. Can you tell? I feel totally bad recommending such an expensive lab setup, but I think that's about the only way you can get around it, and that's going to be actually what we use throughout this series as I set things up and place calls and so on. Fourth way to get the most from this series is to dig deeper. When you're getting into this material, you might have something that triggers in your mind. You go, I wonder if if those kind of things happen in your mind. Set it up in your lab, or go online, go to Cisco's website and dig deeper into the syntax and go, well, how much more could I do with that, or how many DSPs do I need? There's a lot of things that you're gonna think of, and you're gonna want to dig deeper. And honestly, that's what I see my job as most of the time, is to not just give you the information and prepare you for the exam, which we're going to do as we go through this series, but my job, what I feel like I do, is to really just get people interested in this, to make it, make this material just go, yeah, this is really interesting. Want to check it out? Go for it, because that's going to be what you do in the real world. Is you have to fire yourself up and get into a lot of deep, cool stuff. Last but not least. Wipe the tear from my eye. I recommend that you fall in love. Fall in love with the Cisco technology. You always hear that the person who is best at a job is somebody who loves what they do. And I recommend that as you go through here, you really fall in love with this. Now, I'm not going to tell you it's going to be easy all the time. You're not always going to say, "Oh, that's the most interesting thing ever. I really want to dig deeper. I love this stuff." Sometimes it just doesn't come naturally. What I would say, and this is going to sound really weird, force it. Force falling in love with this material. When I first got into the voice over IP world, I didn't want to go. This was actually years ago. I was at a Cisco learning partner, and they wanted me to write the CCVP curriculum. Cisco actually contracted with them to write their official curriculum, and I said, voice just isn't really interesting to me. And they said, well, that's what we're doing. Sorry. And I said, okay. So I started getting into it, and at first when I saw it, I was like, wow, this is rough. I'm not really interested in this. But as I dig deeper, I found that most of my lack of desire, or lack of love, if you will, for the material came because I was just not understanding it all. I was seeing it, I'm like, okay, I guess I see how it works, but I didn't really see how it works. Once I got it, I go, okay, that's cool. How does a T1 line really work? How does it chop up the DS0 channels and all that? First, when I was in the data world, I would have been like, I don't know, I don't care. I send packets, that's what I do. But when I got into this world, and when I learned how it works, I go, wow, now that is cool. Whoever thought of that is brilliant. So that's my nutshell recommendations of how to get the most from this series. Well, whether you are here for certification, real-world experience, or a combination of both, I know that you're going to love this CCNA Voice series. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.